Hello and welcome to the first part of what I hope will be many parts of a review of the first season of Digimon Digital Monsters. This is a show that I grew up with many years ago, and chances are, if you're listening to this review, you probably did as well. Now, obviously, like many people, I grew up with plenty of different shows, but I'm going to be reviewing this one for a few reasons. First of all, I think it's probably the one that I at least respect the most out of any show I watched when I was little, in the sense that I can look back at it today and see why it is, in some respects, still good, and I can see why I liked it back then as well. Also, perhaps most importantly, I actually have some things to say about this show. A lot of the shows I watched when I was little, there really isn't that much to say about them. They are what they are. But I do think there are some interesting discussion points about this show that actually probably occurred to me now that I'm older. So, I think there's enough here to fill a substantial review of every episode of the first season, and if I end up having time, eventually the second season. But I'm getting way ahead of myself here. Now, to quickly run down my experience with the show, and it should be said that I grew up with the Americanized dub, which I realize is inferior in many ways, but it's the one I grew up with, and for the most part, it's going to be the one that I will be discussing. My first experience with the show was with episode 38, titled Prophecy. It was actually a very good episode to start the experience with. I believe the episode was a rerun, but I also believe that the Dark Master saga had not begun to show in America yet. At that point, I started to watch reruns and basically experience Season 1 in a random order. I believe I even missed one episode until years later. Fortunately, because of the way things were scheduled, I was able to pretty much completely catch up on the first season by the time the Dark Master saga started. Season 2, however, I did experience in order, and I watched each episode when it premiered for American audiences. I also did the same for Season 3 at first, but unfortunately near the end, I think I missed one episode. I couldn't tell you which one it was, but I then tried to watch the following episode because I never got a chance to watch the one I missed, and I was completely lost as to what was going on, so I simply decided to give up on the show. That, and I really wasn't enjoying Season 3 all that much anyway, which is why there's really no possibility of me getting into a review of it. And that was my experience with the show when I was growing up. Now I want to fast forward a few years, and I guess it was about 4 years ago I rewatched the entire first season with my brother on YouTube, and then I ended up rewatching Season 2 by myself on YouTube as well, and I was able to kind of refresh my memory as to what was going on, and some things kind of occurred to me about the show that didn't before, and it actually kind of sparked my interest in this way that I'm talking about it now to you. I'm also going to give a quick shout out to a website that I've read quite a bit over the years, www.digimonuncensored with a dash in between the two words .com. This contains a breakdown of dub to sub comparisons of, I believe, every episode of Digimon, or at least every episode of the first two seasons. I highly recommend checking it out. It contains some very in-depth comparisons, and it basically pretty much shows how badly this show got butchered in America, but not quite to the extent of something like One Piece or Bleach. I'll be using this site quite a bit as a little bit of a reference, and I'll be rewatching old episodes if I've simply forgotten some details about that episode and want to refresh my mind on it. But that's basically my experience with the series as a whole. Now, I realize I've used a lot of this video up already without even discussing the first episode at all, but that's perfectly fine with me because very little happens in this first episode. The series gets off to an admittedly understandably, but at the same time still, a pretty slow start. The series opens with discussion of weather reports. Yeah, I know, it's better than it sounds. Basically, all over the world, the weather is freaking out. The strangest things are going on. It's snowing during the summer, it's boiling hot during the winter, and pretty much the entire world is just standing around scratching their head wondering what the hell is going on. Except our main characters. All of our characters are at summer camp and, as of the start of the episode, have no idea what's going on. This information is narrated to us by Ty, and I'll talk more about what that does in a couple of minutes. But first, let me open by saying the weather quickly becomes an issue even at the summer camp. It starts snowing. And so we are quickly introduced to our 7 main characters as they react to this strange phenomenon. This quick character introduction is, again, done with Ty narrating. This makes it seem like Ty is the main character, which wasn't the case in the Japanese sub. There was no main character in the Japanese sub. All 7 of the characters were just sort of there equally. I guess it could be fair to say that Ty got more screen time, but this was partially coincidental. So with the very subtle and seemingly insignificant change of not having a normal narrator and instead having one of the characters narrate, we can see already how this series is shifting away from its Japanese sub roots. Whether or not having a main character is a good thing is entirely up to personal opinion. I personally don't have any problem with it, and I kind of have a hard time seeing the series any other way now, but again, it's just all up to personal preference. Obviously, all the character names get changed, which doesn't bother me. As a matter of fact, being that I grew up with the dub, those names seem more natural to me than the Japanese ones. But you know what does bother me? 2 very unfortunate trends in this series start from the very beginning. Episode 1, and we're going to get off to 2 very unfortunate habits that this series never seems to kick, and really reduces what it could have been. The first is the dialogue. First of all, there's too much of it. Whoever dubbed this series clearly thought there was something wrong with silence. This is both present in the sense that in scenes that should have and probably needed to be silent, we get talking. And there also seems to be some sort of requirement for each character to crack a joke at every single moment possible. It doesn't matter if the situation calls for it. It doesn't matter if the joke is good. It doesn't even matter if it makes much sense. They still have to come up with something funny to say. And I use the term funny loosely because many things said in this series simply aren't. Listen to Ty's opening narration and see how many jokes he tries to crack. See how he keeps trying to be funny, like we're gonna lose attention if he's not consistently funny, even though the situation really doesn't call for it. I mean, look at his introduction to the other main characters. He's always trying to say something a little funny. And it just doesn't need to be there. It's unfortunate because this partially leads to the next problem. For the sake of comedy, these characters, pretty much all of them, are dumbed down and stereotyped. Now, some of the characters get off easy here. Ty, for the most part, is the same person, the only major difference coming from the fact that he's always trying to crack jokes like everybody else, which makes him seem like kind of a dick. But I mean, you know, Ty's the brave, adventurous, leader, gung-ho type. Matt's kind of the loner, badass character. And Sora's kind of like in between being a tomboy and being a girl. She's not quite sure where she wants to be. And these characters are sort of close to what they were originally. I mean, Sora's kind of bitchy, but angst is a part of character development. So those 3 I can live with. But the other 4... well, major victim number 1 would be Izzy, who got turned into the stereotypical geek or nerd just for the sake of jokes. You know, he always uses big words. We all know that intelligent people don't know how to speak normally. He's always on his computer. He's always trying to spend time with his electronics and get away from people. You know, all that kind of stuff. You know, don't be sensitive to his character or anything. Just have him be a vehicle for every single geek stereotype you can think of. That's basically what Izzy's character boils down to in this show. Mimi gets it the worst. In the sub, she was just your normal girly girl. You know, maybe she was into a couple of the stereotypical girl type things, but here she's half ditz, and I do mean the completely brainless ditz, and really half Libby. I don't know why the people who dubbed this show hated Mimi so much, but they turn her into somebody with no brain and is just constantly doing girly girl stereotypes for the sake of cheap humor. No character got messed up more than Mimi, and for whatever reason, the writers love to abuse her in future episodes. And then you have Joe, who originally was just responsible, mature, careful, a lot of things that characterize being slightly older because he is kind of the elder of the group. But here he's whiny, pessimistic, always down, always freaking out about everything, and just really annoying. It's another character assassination where they take his character traits and exaggerate them to the point where nobody can miss what they're trying to do with his character, even though it ends up completely ruining the traits that make him an actual person. Now, this last character, TK, isn't necessarily horrible, but for the most part, he is just there to do stereotypical little kid things. Now, he does grow into a much better character later on, but for now, he's just kind of a vehicle to do stereotypical little kid things.